welcome to another episode of Coffee with April. This is going to be our first session of multiple episodes where we're talking about learning how to roast coffee, which fits in very well because Joe is learning how to roast coffee, right? So these are going to be shorter kind of videos, lifting like 1-2 points every video, and all of it will hopefully get you guys a better insight in what to think about when you're learning to roast coffee. So, Joe, you've been roasting now for a few months.
Yeah, a little while.
Yeah. And is there any kind of things that stands out as very important that you may have not, thought about was very important when you started how to roast? Like a few things that are just, maybe not the most obvious ones, but when you're in it, you realize that this is maybe what I should actually focus on.
Yeah. There are many, so we just stick with a few for today.
Yep.
So prior to working with April, I was a barista. So you kind of learn some things about roasting from being a barista to a certain extent, or at least you think so. There are many things though that you can't see, and the different effects. The one thing I was most surprised about in terms of roasting was actually the time in between protocols and how much that's actually affecting your consistency and the quality of your roasts. So we're roasting with a Loring, very high quality machine, very efficient, a lot of fun to work with, and quite simple in its design and how intuitive it is. But still then I was finding when I first started and using reference curves and the same batch sizes, I was getting differences, fluctuations between batches, and just trying to unwrap where the changes were coming from, and then seeing the biggest fluctuation was my time in between and things that I was doing. And if I made a mistake and I opened the door or something, that's you're losing so much energy there that the next batch you're going to see a massive difference in terms of your environment temperatures, and that's going to change your rate of rises as well. Really, really interesting, and that's when I realized, you need to be just as structured in terms of time and workflow in coffee roasting as you need to be on the bar pulling shots, because
for sure.
you need to overlap each of the things, and you need to keep it consistent. If you're not tearing to 0.1, for example, on a bar, and someone else is, you're actually brewing different coffees. It can be the same thing if we're roasting in different ways and we're not keeping the same time in between protocols as well.
That is a big challenge when going from one person roasting to two people roasting, right? Then all of these details becomes very, very important.
Yeah.
And just to clarify for you guys that may not understand what we're talking about, so in between is just, so the roast is done, the coffee comes out, right? Pretty simple. Now the question here is, what do you do until it's time for the next batch? And what we're trying to do here is to retain a consistent amount of temperature or energy when we're roasting. And there's a few really important pointers there. First of all, time. Second of all, how long is the door open versus not open? What kind of burner settings are you working with in between as well? And also how you're structuring your green coffee, so the scheduling in itself. Meaning that, for example, if you mix between bigger and smaller batches continuously throughout the roast day, you're going to have a different amount of energy as well, right? So when working on a reference curve, one should work with a similar roasted coffee as the profile before the reference curve, when the reference curve was decided as well. Cool. So in between protocol is something that you realized is very important. Anything else that you're thinking about?
We're working on QC and everything else as well here. It's really lucky that there's just the two of us that's going to cover everything, green coffee buying. So that actually allows me to learn pretty quickly across the board in that sense, the way that each element is going to affect each other. And it's really obvious to me now that I have never really understood the intricacies of green aging until this point. And the way that your green is going to change from the moment you receive it. It's already been changing before that, but you just don't get to see it. And how you store it and how it's going to change from then on. We see that on the cupping table. We also see that when roasting as well. That you're going to see that the batches are actually reacting very differently, and it can be really kind of small things as well. You may, you know, keep your density and moisture readings, but that might not actually give you any indication of a change. It's going to come in the flavor or in the way that it's pushing in terms of a curve. And that, I mean, that's really interesting to me. It's also not linear in the sense that it's fluctuating, you know, and that's fascinating to try to get your head around as well, and figure out the variables that are actually affecting that, whether or not it's something that you could do better and you could standardize, or it's actually something you're not in control of, and then you need to reconsider your approach to it in some way. But yeah, I mean, that I never kind of would have understood the complexities of.
Yeah, it is very complicated, and to some extent, one of the most important parts of it as well, right? Your roasts are never better than the green coffee you're working with, and the biggest part in terms of how a coffee will age or progress is processing, right?
Yeah.
So processing is deciding a bunch of important things. Most importantly, water activity and moisture levels, right? And if the processing is done right, which specialty coffee by default kind of indicates, then the coffee should be very stable. Still, we realized this past years that some coffees are really kind of, okay, they arrive, they taste amazing, goes a few more months, they're dropping off a bit of quality, and then all of a sudden 3 months later, they're tasting even better than what they did in the beginning, right? Yeah. So there's definitely a few kind of mysteries there that we are also kind of trying to gauge and understand, and then water activity is a big part of that storage as well, but then to some extent it's also from green coffee to green coffee.
Yeah. I mean, and not origin based either. You know, you can have coffees from a very similar region, and they change very inconsistently. You can have coffees that you bought year on year, and again they've initially reacted the same, but then they change up, and you just can't see them in the values. It's really interesting actually. It's fascinating.
Yeah. Cool. So this was just a first kind of little video. Talked a bit about the importance of time in between in terms of roasting, and how interesting it is and challenging it is with green coffees that are continuously changing throughout the year in terms of the taste it gives you. This is just the first episode of many, where we're gonna use the fact that Joe is learning how to roast coffee, and kind of, you know, every once in a while check in with Joe and see what's kind of new, what's going on, and what he has to share to us. Cool. Thank you guys for watching. As always, comments down here. We're always happy to answer any questions you might have.
Especially specific to this as well. If there are other people learning to roast now, or people who've already learned to roast, but there are things they've maybe not considered, by all means, shout questions. It could be interesting for us to discuss them.
Yeah, I think super interesting, and that's part of what we want to do. And if you have any like specific things that you want us to talk about here, or explore when we roast as well, then just give us a shout. Thank you very much.